sad experience with a big cycling route and a walking route, and which in my view there were different reasons why it didn't succeed, which had to do with public participation, how much the public was part of it. But I would like to ask you, I mean, first of all, Peter is a passionate cyclist. He campaigned for cycling issues, and in 2005 you started the Cycle to Cannes charity bike ride, and in 2013 you took part in a 66,000 kilometer ride for charity from Portland, Oregon to Portland Place, London, researching the implementation of cycling strategies in the United States. So I'd like to hear from you a little bit about cycling, about how do we work out the balance in creating those bicycle routes when we know that when we create a bicycle route, we're taking away something else. It could be a lane for traffic, it could be a lane for parking. How do you work this balance out?
Well, one of the things I picked up from my ride across America was that the Americans talk about road diets. And I think road diets is a very good way to put it, because diets make people healthier, and I think road diets would make cities healthier and better places to be, better public spaces and places that people can enjoy. That doesn't mean that it's easy to make that change, despite all the advantages. And certainly, if you listen to Jan Gehl, speak to him about how do you change a city, he said, well, you have to be patient. He said, it took me 40 years before I could change Copenhagen into a city which was more aimed towards active travel, cycling and walking. But it's now too late. We don't have time for patience. We need to change things more quickly. But that, again, is not easy. And John talked about the impact of COVID. One of the big impacts of COVID in quite a lot of cities was that greater space was made available for walking and for cycling. And also we're in the UK, what we called low traffic neighbourhoods, which was actually reducing cars travelling through residential areas. And this was implemented very quickly indeed and caused huge outrage amongst motorists who felt that it was taking them a couple more minutes to drive to the shops or do lots of journeys which probably you wouldn't need to drive to if you had proper walking and cycling or active travel conditions. And by active travel, I'm talking about journeys which are made using either public transport, walking or cycling. And there are parts of London, if you take the City of London, our central business district, 93% of people, normally when they're coming into work, not so many are coming into work right now, but when they're coming into work, 93% of those travel from their home via a mixture of public transport, walking or cycling, and so no use of private cars at all. So new office buildings do not have any parking provision in them at all, and that is actively discouraged. And in the States, you'll find, actually large surface areas of cities right across the States are taken up with car parking, which destroys the feeling of urbanity and pleasant places to be. So how you deal with the antagonism of motorists? We've had over a century of hard selling by the car industry as to how wonderful it is to sit inside an automobile and travel. And I see there's plenty of people. I'm told a lot of people have to drive here because that's the most convenient way of getting to a place like this. And I think the future city has to have a good public transport network which allows people to use them and not always depend on the car. And as I was saying, I was very critical of the predominance of electric vehicles. At COP, electric vehicles are certainly less polluting, less noisy than existing diesel or petrol-driven cars. But it just means that they will fill up the streets in exactly the same way. And my view of cities is that in most of them, streets are public spaces, and we need to be using them in a much more creative and elegant and attractive way than we do at the moment, and not fill them up with tin boxes which pollute and kill and make everyone lazy. And we should get out and be healthy and walk, cycle, and use public transport.
Absolutely. And of course, now we also have the self-driven cars, which is another issue, where where cars, this, on one side, it's like there will be less cars for people, but on the other hand, people are afraid that instead of taking the car to park, self-park, it will be driving in the streets until it will pick you up. So it will create more congestion than actually save congestion. So there's a lot of issues with cars. The minute you work with a car, with a private car, you're still with the same problems. You have to build more streets. You have to take more space, urban space for cars.
Yes, but I think we have to move to an idea of mobility as a service rather than the actual product that we're driven way of moving around cities at the moment. And I don't hear so much about autonomous vehicles at the moment, really. I feel the idea that amongst city makers generally is that they're further away now than they thought they were maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and there are other key issues that need to be dealt with. So, we just don't want to fill the streets with more tin when we are on the verge in many places of creating better places, and I think it's better places which is most important.
For people, absolutely. And it's interesting you mentioned Ian Gale. It took him really 40 years to prove to people that measuring people traffic and not car traffic has more value, and eventually it has more value to the city. But it takes time. It takes time. Yeah. Now, I would like to ask Michelle and John if you would like to speak to us about the park bit, the project, which was so forward-looking and it was so relevant when people start to work from home, and how does that, it was back in the 90s, right? If you can tell us
it's kind of a scoop of a project that was thought out 30 years ago. I thought it would be relevant because we responded a project called Parkbit. A lot of British and American firms, and actually firms around the world, have been participating to the call of regenerating Mallorca, the island, in a similar context as Greece, subject to excessive tourism, and trying to see if there were any alternative ways of living, working, and playing on an island that attracts mass tourism, where the peasants are now serving beer to French, British, and German tourists. While they serve the beer, nobody's maintaining the land. Then when it rains, the water goes straight to the sea. So the call was to say, okay, there was many firms, and we were John and I were four people in New York. We kind of were the wild card and proposed a few concepts, and it did hit the score. We ended up with Richard Rogers with the two projects primed, both talking about a word that didn't exist then. We're talking about 94, and those drawings on the background are what we answered. We're talking about sustainability with a radical different approach, where Richard was a pioneer in making, with archigram, making how to occupy the earth without affecting it too much, but still it was machinist kind of approach. What I got influenced, being a Parisian from origin and having been taught by a great philosopher, I remember Michel Serres, this professor at the Sorbonne, saying that sometimes, I made a whole class about the fact that the reality of the peasant may be more knowledgeable than the one of the scientific. And that marked me so much, because we are living, Greece included obviously, from the start of civilization with our people, our predecessors, writing the earth again, over and again, and borrowing from the earth, bringing food, and then giving it back to the earth into a cycle. So what we propose is to say, okay, let's read the work of the present, peasants. Technology is transparent. 94, there was a start of the web, start of internet. Nobody was used to it. We said technology is transparent, scrap the high tech. And then the third thing was how to address the water issue. And we went to the city of San Diego at the time where they were experimenting the water treatment to go from gray water to new water. So almost drinkable. Drinkable, let's put it that way. And I came to see, we were based in New York then, I came to see a few people dealing with energy and water treatment, major companies in Europe presenting the idea. As we were proposing our competition vision, I wanted to have the support of the industry. And the answer was kind of enigmatic first and then radical after. I was told that this doesn't work, doesn't exist. I demonstrated that the city of San Diego is doing it. And they said, Mr. Mosassian, you will never do that in Europe, I guarantee. So there was a threat to me. I had to disappear, leave the room, leave the building, and then run away. So nevertheless, we kind of propose our vision. And earlier, during COVID, obviously, a lot of people moved out of city center. Those lucky to have a second home in the countryside or on the seaside took the opportunity to withdraw from the cities and, try to cope with the children, with the work, and with Zoom technology. All this kind of flipped a little bit the relationship to our cities. And I thought it would be interesting to show something that was designed and drawn 30 years ago, and actually how does it sound, and to a way to engage with nature, but where culture weaves itself into nature and helps to give back rather than just taking. But as I said, I think back then I had the people, the king of the road of energy, that would have put a gun on my head if I was insisting further. I don't know what's the status of the industry today, but I think we are caught up into an incredible, complex, weaved system of habits, technology, procedure, code. All this system that make us safer actually is making us numb and paralyzed. Is it? Is it not? How can we unlock?
It's certainly very complex. I mean, it's very complex, and also it's very interesting that you speak about developing the remote working areas, like what COVID actually created, when a lot of people, instead of being locked down in a city, they went to the countryside and they got locked down in a countryside, working remotely with their office. So that really, basically what you were talking about was a little bit of what we experienced about a year ago, which is kind of interesting. And John, you'd like to also add something, because you were part of this project.
Again, as Michel mentioned, it's a project we did close to 20 years ago.
30.
30 years ago, yeah. Okay. One of the things for me that's interesting is a lot of times, especially on a new project when you're doing something, a lot of the effort is unlearning what you already know, so you can understand what the actual problem is, and then restructure your thinking in a way that's a little bit devoid of your own biases and styles, let's call it. And for me, ParkBit and COVID has sort of forced me to go back and unlearn what I've done and reevaluate what I did before in a new way. And what I take from it now is, it was about 5 years before LEAD and the initiative that came up. And while that's true, I don't think that project would get a LEED rating right now, right? Because it's not based on products. It's not based on systems that are applied to architecture to make them ecological. It's based on orienting the buildings correctly and using local material in a traditional way, but with technology to improve its performance. It's all passive. It's not actively tracking the sun, and right, it's working with the earth in a way that is in a more natural rhythm. And to go back after building quite a bit and having a career and reevaluate that as a result of, again, this intersection point of COVID and the realization of a climate crisis. I can go back at that and look at and criticize myself and work things that we did, but also see that there were some things there that actually have value and they need to be extracted into what I do next and relearned again.
Yeah. Michel mentioned something about the changing the industry, and I would like to stop on this point and say that strategy is one way of changing the industry, but it takes time. And how about small changes in everyday practice? Each one doing a little thing that in total will make a significant difference. What would you recommend to professional colleagues, to younger professionals, as one or two things that they can really change right now? And I'll start with John.
Oh, you should start with Michel on that one.
Michel, okay.
Oh, Peter.
Me? Well, actually, I'll just start with one comment on Parkbit, actually, because I also got involved in that project a little bit later on, and one of the economic drivers of Parkbit was to, instead of having people in package holidays who actually spent very little in the island, that get wealthier itinerant virtual workers coming there to spend time. But actually what happened was that cycling became really popular in Mallorca, because Mallorca is a brilliant place in the winter for cycling teams to train. So if you were entering the Tour de France, you go and train in Mallorca, and that also now has attracted all the, might say, amateur riders who want to get fitter and do the Étape de Tour and things like that. They also train in the island. So now there is a huge industry of people, they're very nice roads as well, training, and that actually brings high-spending, middle-class people into the Mallorcan economy in a very positive way. So actually, they got the result, but in a slightly different way. Yeah, younger people and what they can do. And I just think that Michel was wrong in saying that shouldn't be lecturing to people, because it's our generation. It's fucked everything up, really, Michel, and we do need to take some responsibility for that and talk about how we can change it. Because I would say that for me, I mean, these are discussions. I mean, you heard about what Michel was doing in the 90s, but back even in the 60s, I worked with Buckminster Fuller on, he had organized a thing called the World Design Science Decade. Buckminster Fuller then thought that actually architecture students were the people he could use to work on this idea he had about spaceship Earth. He believed, which is correct, and we know that now, that the world is a closed system. We have to clear up our own mess and sort it out within that. Going off and living in Mars or the moon is not an answer to the climate crisis. We actually have to find ways of dealing with our mess in a way that, as though a spaceship does, that it has to actually stay, it has to be sustainable within itself. And Buckminster Fuller set out this decade, and it wasn't, we weren't worried about CO2 emissions in those days and global warming. It was basically that resources were going to run out. Oil was going to run out, and many other things as well, and some of those we're seeing happening now. And so the World Design Science Decade did produce quite a lot of documentation at the time of about resources and how you make more efficient use of them. But actually, disappointingly, architecture students didn't really come and support Buckminster Fuller's as much as he could. But there was a lot of work going on around solar energy, solar housing, solar walls, trom walls. I mean, a whole lot of experimentation happening on this journey to try and reduce our reliance and wastage of resources. And it changed architecture for me. I mean, the Architecture Association, where I was as a student and then taught for a bit, was very much the centre of a lot of this thinking that was going on. And that changed when, and I think there was a moment when Zaha Hadid was a student there, and her view was that basically all this idea that architecture should have a role in generating any sort of social justice was just, as she called it, bullshit, really, and that architecture was about form and creating nice-looking buildings, but actually the fact they did good to society, the wider society, was not something that architects should be concerned with. And that was a big shift in the Architecture Association, but actually it was a shift which that generation within the Architecture Association spread throughout the architectural world, actually, and it was manifested in the Starchitects of the the beginning of this century. And I think that now we are actually moving into a period where we have to get back to thinking much more seriously of the impact that architecture has in the way that people live and equitable issues around how people live in them. And another statement that was, I think, very relevant, which was in the mid-70s, a chap called Alec Gordon, who was president of the RIBA, talked about long life, loose fit, low energy. And I think that is even more relevant today when we're talking seriously about the circular economy, that our buildings need to be able to change for different uses. Just as, we have 19th century warehouses we can turn into architecture studios or artist lofts, or a sort of flexibility in the built form, which we have lost in recent years as we tighten up specifications and reduce everything to the minimum, rather than leaving that sort of generosity which allows a freer use of our building resources.
Okay, so can I answer? So
you've got 11 minutes.
Well, you took 5 there when I passed the ball. Was I wrong to say that we cannot lecture and pontificate to the young people about what we know? I don't think so, because I think really there's a level, the necessity of a transition of passing on our knowledge to help those that are not stuck in their own technical resolution. I'm talking from the practice that I have, and also the fact that I always entertain a closeness to academia from my early age, from my early time. It's really going from concept to craft. It takes the energy that, and we've been talking about that, Peter, the companion, the people that build the cathedrals. They knew that one architect or one builder could not see the end of his work. It'd be over 3 generations of masters, with a lot of then routine and setting of the apprentice, learning all from the master as the master is alive. And then when the master said to the apprentice, you're ready, you can go, and not only he could go elsewhere, but he could finish the work started. So I think it's a question of time to take for the collective, and what else than the magic of a collective place such as a home for many that has no functions other than coming together. Sorry, God is included, but it's not a necessity. It's the fact that it's a collective effort and the passing of knowledge. And isn't that the most sustainable way to mingle materials with people, knowledge, and future? So this is where I think we need to reinvent the way. And you're naming Buckminster Fuller, but if you look also at Frank Lloyd Wright, the first American architect that said no to Europe, and look at what America wanted to be as what is the DNA of the American culture, looking obviously at the Native Americans and the Indians, and
until the German architects came to the United States.
Sorry?
In the 40s. Until the German architects came to the United States in the 40s.
so
And everything changed.
Frank Lloyd Wright found an amazing way of mingling education with taking students in a shop, working on experimental projects and extracting them from Chicago to Arizona, and then working for 6 months of a year in the sun, in a good climate, dry climate, and probably saved 20 years of his life. And we got masterpieces out of this, and incredible trained young architects, I believe. So that's
Arcosanti was a byproduct of Frank Lloyd Wright. Soleri, Paolo Soleri, Michel, correct?
Paolo Soleri, yeah.
Paolo Soleri.
it's different.
Uh-huh.
Soleri?
But he was an apprentice of Frank Lloyd Wright.
Yes,
Paolo
yes, yeah,
Soleri.
no, you're right. That's a follow-up.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Yeah,
John.
look, I think we need to, the only thing I can communicate in that is we're willing to believe in all lots of things that don't exist. Yeah, and put our faith and hope. And I started this conversation with faith and hope and despair, and we're willing to do that to things that don't exist. In the history, in our past, it's been religion, let's say, and in the present, it's Bitcoin, let's say, right? We believe in the power of math and computer stuff. And what we need to believe in is the thing we're walking on, right? Is the space we're occupying. We need to respect that. The video that was playing before a bit, the Live, Eat, Oil, was trying to just have a look at, how do we treat this earth? How do we treat the surface that we live on? What do we take from it? What do we leave on it? And how do we damage it in a way that is not only damaging it temporarily, but injecting poisons and problems that are not only for our kids, but for generations to come. If we weren't able to do that, we need to find a mechanism to engage the next generation to not look at our example on how we've walked on this earth and actually try to walk another way.
We have 6 minutes. Do we have any questions? Okay, I don't see any. So let's do this really fast. Value chain. Are architects part of the value chain? I would phrase it in 2 ways, and I would like to hear from you very shortly, 1 sentence each. First, how do the architects play a role in the value chain of addressing climate change globally? And secondly, how does climate change affect the value chain of each individual architecture practice in every city and country around the world? How do you respond on this? Michel?
No, why me?
John?
I need to think of my sentence. Peter, you have one?
No, you start. You pass the last question on to me. Come on.
John, go for it.
You're the practicing architect.
Sure.
Not
Value
me.
chain, we play a huge role in the value chain. Yeah, we're responsible for 40% of this problem. So we play a huge role in this value chain.
1 sentence.
Oh, he can
Sure.
say it, it's okay.
How we use and reuse the infrastructures that we have. We now have to deal with 2 problems. Here's the 1 sentence. The 2 problems we have to deal with is trying to reach net zero, trying to go beyond that, and trying to deal with the immediate changes that are going to happen in our environment. And those things are at conflict with each other, right? If we're going to need to build water protection systems and dams, that's going to add to the carbon problem. So net zero it sounds very nice, but we actually need to go much further than that and really engage that value chain to mean more than what the general goal is.
Okay, so I take the ball back. Sorry. I think you can be as good as what you ask to do. So it's we have to kind of educate our young people. I agree with Peter, but we have to wish that if we have anything to educate our clients with, they are also starving to know what to do and how to do it. So it's kind of a limbo, but we're all in the same bag here. Are we part of the value chain? Yes, probably, because we are the instruments, we're the practitioner. So there's a code of ethic, there's codes, but there's an attitude that also has to be flexible with commerciality of our profession. So we're always going to be kind of going in loops and not necessarily bringing the solutions as a way to do it. It's a slow percolation process, like a good coffee or a good wine, as Peter would say. You missed this one.
Peter, what's your take on this?
I'll just say briefly, when I said I didn't think Michel should worry about lecturing, I mean, I think it is a collaboration, experienced and mature architects, and I think the impact of young people, I mean, Greta is obviously a phenomenon, but there are hundreds of thousands of young people who are really having a real impact on the debate at the moment. So I think that's important to say that. I mean, in terms of architects, part of the value chain, I think architects part of humanity more generally, and it seems to me that actually what we need to do is to see how we respond to climate change as a moral issue. It's something which we all need to do, and it's not something that is necessarily a choice and something that we can either blame on other people. We all have to live our lives as a part of a belief around our ability to offer positive change. And I often hear people saying, well, what's the use of me not flying somewhere because look at the Chinese and how many power stations they've got. I don't think that's the debate at all. It's actually what you as an individual do and the moral stance you take.
Thank you. So, thank you very much. I would like to thank Peter Morey and Michel Mosesian and John Veikos. Thank you for joining us at this panel. I'm Elias Messinas, and thank you for joining us. Thank you very much.
We still have a minute.